Alright, should be making a video on DraftScience and such. Pierrot. So, back from 2 years ago. Alright, so, obviously me and Pierrot have this whole falling out thing, blah blah blah. And so he made a recent video to some, some truther guy, conspiracy believer, and he's bending over backwards to try not to be offensive and to try to prevent there to be any hard feelings, and going to all this work to preserve a relationship that doesn't even, from my experience in the 10 years I've been watching Pierrot, has only the tiniest of periphery of relevance to anything he's ever talked about. So here's a character who maybe he's watched his videos for 9 years or something, and but he's never really felt the need to comment on them or to make any substantial response videos. And here he is, desperate to preserve some sort of connection to this person. And so I just thought that was sort of almost a, I hate to say it, a concession on his part, that maybe there's something about his personality or his behavior or his way of interacting with people that is might be responsible for his less than favorable, less than what he intends to have happen in terms of interacting with people. Now, I would consider myself a perfectly reasonable person, but I am defensive. That is, there's few things about me that, I mean, I won't defend the fact that, you know, the paint is peeling off my ceiling. I can't see it in this picture, but, you know, people see it, okay? There's cobwebs all the way around the roof, the ceilings here. You know, I couldn't give a shit. I'll concede there's some aspects to my life I just couldn't give a shit about. I don't comb my hair. I don't do lots of things. And so I'm subject to ridicule. I'm subject to people changing the subject to me, okay, and my life or my appearance or some other kind of crap. And most of that I just couldn't care less. Okay, fine, go ahead and ridicule. It's an acceptable thing to point out, but it's totally irrelevant in my opinion, so it's really not the subject of my videos. How I need to change who I am. I don't think I do. But anyway, so that's all just distraction. But when you accuse me of being dishonest, or, you know, these are the things I might care about, you know, or you know, imply that I have some underhanded intentions, or that I've somehow manipulated a truth or a fact, or have done something unethical, yeah, then I get pissed off. It's like when I said, look, I'll eat other people's garbage. So if somebody gives me a piece of tuna fish, a can of tuna fish that we're going to throw in the garbage, yeah, I'll eat it. Even though I'm a vegetarian, I'll eat it because, yeah, the fish is already dead, okay? I'm not going to save the fish by throwing it in the garbage, right? So, you know, and then people turn that into, he's not really a vegetarian, or he's a hypocrite. It's like, no, I'm not a hypocrite. My whole intention is to stop animals from being exploited or harmed. And if you can show me how throwing food in the garbage stops animals from being harmed, then I'll concede to your argument. But until I hear the argument that explains how the dead fish is going to be made alive by throwing the food in the garbage, fine. But anyway, you know, so little shit like that just bugs the fuck out of me. You know, when people make accusations of hypocrisy or duplicity, yeah, that's not acceptable. And Pierrot made a ton of those, and his whole attitude was just dismissive. And so, yeah, there was a point where I'm not, you know, why should I just accept somebody who just says, we're authorities, you're wrong, I can mock you? I'm not going to bother even trying to make an argument. And then when he did try to make an argument, he made an argument with, you know, what was obviously not very high integrity evidence. So he came to the courtroom and he, like the cement footprints, you know, in the OJ trial, right? They tried to sneak into the trial. Look, there's other footprints in the sidewalk. Yeah, and they were in the cement. They were people's footprints. They had stepped in the wet cement. So obviously they couldn't have happened the night of the crime, you know, because they were in the cement. So when somebody tries to sneak garbage evidence into something, you got to say, well, what the hell what are you up to? You're not trying to have an honest conversation. And so Pierrot did that. You know, he showed wave tank experiments that had nothing to do with a controlled experiment and doing it fair. You know, noise in, noise out, interference in, interference out. You know, circumstance that was completely bogus, obviously bogus. And he's trying to sneak it in as, oh yeah, this is the real evidence. This proves you wrong. Now, when it's those are cement footprints, buddy. So you do that a couple of times, and then you say, no, this is enough. You know, well, I don't have to accept having arguments with somebody who's, you know, they're claiming I'm being duplicitous, and yet they're being obviously duplicitous. I mean, obviously, you know. So, but you know, again, there's probably no point in making this video in a sense that it's just going to rehash these old arguments, and you know, I can just feel it as soon as I start thinking about it. I'm saying, yeah, there's no way to reclimate a conversation with Pierrot, because he's never going to give me the courtesy that he gives these other people. And maybe I'm not going to either, because it is a 10-year history, and it's been done over and over and over. And like I said, the biggest issue for me with Pierrot was, like I said, you get him to concede a point. You badger him hard enough with the evidence. Say, look, this is what evolution does, and this is, well, look, here's your argument against microtubules having anything to do with being neurons. You know, the fact that they move in straight lines. You know, that they're clearly just pathways for information to travel, but it's really boring information. It's just on-off information. It isn't any kind of sophisticated information. It's nothing like a neural network. There's no way cells are using microtubules as a brain, and if they were, then we would be doing the same thing, because evolution likes efficiency. And so why would we have a big, expensive brain? I mean, our brain consumes more energy than any other organ in your body. Why would we have this big, expensive brain if we could have one made out of microtubules, and we could still feel and still be all, you know, fun and gay and happy? You know. Well, anyway, so maybe it's just too much history. You know, I just been pointing out that, you know, you get him to concede a point, and then he'll just, the next day, he'll just keep talking the same shit. So he's never changed anything, even though and in my opinion, he's been defeated in arguments. He never accepts his defeat, and he just goes on preaching the same crap. And so anyway, like I said, rehashing the argument, I guess there's just no point in me doing that. Beyond saying that, yeah, the real point to me making this video, to be perfectly honest, is there's nothing. There's no one to talk to. All these cranks and all these critics have absolutely no balls. They can't make videos. They're too inept, or they're too afraid. Oh, I got a reputation. I can't make a video. Blah 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 blah. I mean, nobody can do it. The only one who makes an effort to do it is Holiday, and then every effort he makes is so full of lies and nonsense that, you know, I don't know why he bothers. Gotta remember to speak screensavers. Why he even bothers? You know, he just keeps doing the same thing over and over again. Say, oh, I got you, and it's never an I gotcha, not even close to an I gotcha. And he never rationally responds with the appropriate reaction after I have presented so much evidence of all the deceptions portrayed by conventional physics, all the big lies we've predicted, all that big nonsense. Okay, they predicted something any idiot could predict once you see it happen. I predict there'll be a car accident today. There. Do I get a Nobel Prize? I have a statistical algorithm that says there will be a car accident today. There, give me a Nobel Prize. Quantum mechanics predicted it. Bullshit. They predict what we see. Yeah, we see it enough times, and they say, I bet we'll see it again. The quantum mechanics predicts the sunrise. You know. Whoa! What a surprise. What a challenge that was. Way to go, quantum mechanics. So, big lie there. And then all their evidence for lensing, garbage, the evidence, their two-slit experiment, again, they can't get the history right, and they can't get exactly what the thing does right, and they certainly can't get right the fact that it only matches in the one circumstance, and in every other circumstance it doesn't match. So all the evidence against, they're throwing out, and they're only concentrating on the evidence, one kind of evidence, the evidence for, and all the other evidence is ignored, all the evidence against their theory. And they call that being honest? It's not being honest. So when Holiday can't utter the words, yes, the foundational evidence for the foundational presumptions or assumptions of conventional physics, that is, relativity and quantum mechanics, the foundational experiments for those theories is garbage. It's weak evidence. And he can't say the words, because as soon as he says the words, he has to concede that, yes, talking about these elemental experiments and what the elemental truth might be is still a very open conversation. So anyway, so I'll play a little of this because it gets to a couple of the key subjects, one of them non-science and one of them science.
So therefore, everything that we're talking about is from that data set. So we've identified the data set. That's about.
All right, so Pierrot has this theory that it's just about what your personal experience is with a bunch of silly images. That's what the data set is. And everybody's data set is different and blah, blah, blah. I would argue that no, lots of the data set is the same. The books are the same. The Origin of Species is a book. It's the same data set. If you read it honestly, it can only be interpreted one way, rationally. The evidence it presents can only be interpreted one way as evidence, blah, 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 blah. And so lots of our data set is the same data set, and we're really not talking about what kind of feeling you had when you read it or all this other kind of crap. We're just arguing about whether the argument was made, whether the trial took place, and an honest judge, you sat there as an honest juror, right? So if you were an honest juror watching the OJ trial, OJ is guilty as fuck. If you're a dishonest juror, yeah, then he's innocent. But you have to be dishonest. You have to be a completely, insanely dishonest person to say, oh, we haven't proven the fact that there's this obvious implication that it would be an insane number of coincidences for OJ to be, in any possible way, be innocent. It'd be unreasonable to believe so. As unreasonable as believing in aliens and UFOs and all kinds of other unreasonable stuff. Because the evidence is overwhelming. So that's his theory, that this is sort of ambiguous what the truth is. And I'm arguing that no, this is like a connect the dot thing. I make a really good point here, connect the dots. So I'll just make it ahead of time so then when you hear it, you'll say, yeah, I get that. So there is no philosophy. Philosophy is a category of science. And all science is we're looking at a field of dots. And there's either an easy to connect pattern, like gravity, stuff falls, it keeps doing it. No matter what I put in my hand, it falls, blah, blah, blah. You know, the dots are so easy to connect. Falling down, punch fist into brick wall, hurt. Lots of obvious patterns that you can pull out of this field of dots. And some of the patterns aren't so obvious. There's only a few dots of evidence. And so it's a little trickier when we go to connect them. But that's all there is. That's all science is. Science is looking at the field of dots and recognizing that, okay, well, over here, it worked doing a circle. Connecting when I see a circle dot, say it's a circle. And over here, when there's a certain percentage of them, they're making a circle, it always ends up being the truth that it's a circle. And when I get more dots, I see that, yeah, the circle was the right answer. And so in this case, if I have a certain number of dots making a circle, I can be pretty sure, it's pretty reliable that, yes, that's a circle. And that's all science really is understanding when you can jump to a conclusion, when you can't. Okay, and what the common patterns are, the things that happen routinely, you've learned from experience, this connection works, this connection works, this connection works, and so you learn to recognize patterns. And that's all there really is. And that's science. And the science decides both philosophy, that is the philosophy of what it means to be alive, as well as what it is to be alive, that is what it is mechanically. All right, so I would argue things like what the dots show when you connect them rationally is with real certainty determinism and robot. We're just robots. All right, we're programmed by partially by what built us. What factory we popped out of. A Chinese factory or a IBM factory or Google factory, whatever silly factory made us, and that the factory has different credibility, in terms of reliability, and then the rest of it is just environment. The environment we maturate in, and whether we read the evolution of, we read Charles Darwin on a bumpy bus, or whether we read the we read it, in a nice library, going nice and slowly, taking it in, understanding what's being stated, so we can gain our knowledge recklessly and sloppily, or we can gain our knowledge methodically and carefully, and we can have we can actually learn how to learn. That sometimes we have to recognize that you can't really know something until you know it more than you think you should. Okay, so you know it, all right, you say, oh, I got that concept, but then you can know, okay, from previous experience, that it's a good idea to know it another 10%, okay, just to be sure you didn't miss something obvious. So you can learn little tricks, little ways to improve your capacity to do logic and to think and to understand and not to make mistakes. And that's the key to this whole thing. Don't make mistakes. Errors, in your pattern recognition can be catastrophic. You get some of these things wrong, like God, or some other silly notion, and you put that into reality. It just breaks everything. So you gotta really prevent errors. Errors are what you need to prevent. And the whole argument I've been making about this whole physics thing is that there is no obvious evidence of any error prevention here. For the last 100 years, or you could say for the last 200 years, physics really hasn't cared. Science hasn't cared too much about not making mistakes. It's cared about getting to the future as fast as possible. We need our Dick Tracy watch, and we need our flying garbage can, and we need this stuff immediately. So the hell with being careful. Let's just try to jump to the future. Let's jump the evidence. I've made that argument over and over again. It's clear, it's obvious that they jumped the evidence. The New York Times headline, Einstein right, based on the Eddington experiment, was jumping the evidence, way over the evidence. I mean, the thing that, even if Einstein was right about photons being bent by gravity, it wouldn't have proved relativity, right? I mean, it's just, it was wrong for so many reasons. First, it's wrong because it didn't prove photons are bent by gravity, and then second, it's wrong because you don't say the whole theory is right because one piece of it is right.
I'll use people that really care about data. Not you, of course, but people that care about data.
So, see, this is obviously, this is already 2 years ago. We were already so contentious that there was just these constant accusations. I can prove mine, in my opinion. He can't prove any of his. All right, there's no evidence that I don't like data, that I don't like experiments. I'm kind of constantly hunting for them. I'm trying to find them. I mean, I love that I found all these old 60s videos where they actually do experiments, because when you see the experiment, you can see actually, oh, that's what they're implying. That's why they're implying that that's what's going on. And you can actually see the experiment for yourself and say, no, what they're not realizing is blah, 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 blah. I mean, it becomes kind of obvious how they're jumping the evidence. They're jumping the experiment. They're drawing conclusions that the experiment doesn't justify.
What is the environmental evidence point to? I really don't give a shit about your cartoon theories about being super characters or fairies or Tinkerbell orgasmic vagina goop.
Yes, I should slow it down, but yeah, orgasmic vagina goop. I love that. Anyway, I am funny sometimes. Well, it's only 1:25. That shouldn't be too bad. I was probably already speeding this video up. So again, the rhetoric is kind of clear. I mean, there's two branches of mine and Pierrot's relationship, and the philosophical one was getting tired because, yeah, he just keeps defending nonsense. I mean, he defended this whole To Be Serious was talking about epigenetics and how it's so important and blah blah blah, and and Pierrot chimed in, and it's creating all this symbiotic relationships and all this stuff, and I had to point out the physical facts, which are, no, epigenetics just means you can break eggs, you can pervert them, you can pollute them, you can make them less functional. It's only error code. You can make more errors, and sometimes making errors is a good idea evolutionarily, but there's absolutely no correlation between living a good life and having good eggs, like improved eggs. You can't improve your genetics. You can only not destroy it. You can only not harm it. So yes, live a good life, healthy, because it'll make your eggs healthier. That's all you can do. But you can't read a book and, your genetics are now smarter.
I don't care about your little theory where your brain, your bacteria brain, is supposed to be automatically sufficient to understand nature, and if it can't, then nature has to change.
So whatever that is. So, like I said, where have I theorized that you can automatically do anything? All I argue is that our brain has basically been wired to be logical. We've been wired, okay, to have programming that, generally speaking, is going to keep us alive. So some of it is awfully selfish, so that's not very logical. That's not recognizing how all the other brains are just as vulnerable as my brain, and all the other seals, so to speak, are just as good as me, and that I shouldn't be trying to cheat my way to the head of the line to get more cake and all that kind of crap. So yeah, we're not too smart that way because of our impulses being selfish. But the basic capacity of our brain to be logical is reliable, because obviously it's like navigating around trees or something. What good would it be to the wolf to see trees that don't exist? It wouldn't be of any value at all. So he wants to be able to see the ones that do exist, and he wants to be able to avoid those. And we have the same kind of basic mechanism, is we want to get right answers, because right answers are much more valuable than wrong answers. And all that really changes anything is the information. Again, placing the right value, getting the initial symbols correct, so then you can understand what probabilistically is going to happen in other places. And so if you start off looking for the phantasmagorical and ignoring all the evidence that says no, there are no UFOs, but you keep focusing on the stuff that says there are, then yeah, you're going to end up with a distorted perception of reality. It's not going to be your brain's fault. It's going to be the processing of your information and the fact that you jumped to a conclusion too quickly. You wanted something to be true more than you cared to get the truth.
That sounds like a God theory to me. Like, I trust my intuition. That's my remaining God.
Okay, so just more nonsense. So these kind of lies are just amazing, where obviously I'm saying intuition sucks. I say it over and over and over again. Don't judge the book by the cover. Do the deeper analysis. Make sure the evidence is legitimate. Dig in. So it's just a complete anti rhetoric, in the sense that it has absolutely nothing to do with the truth. It's just something made up in his head. He can't prove that I've ever been an intuitionalist, or somebody who says, quick, superficial judgments are the best judgments. Of course, I've never said any such thing. So it's just such a nonsense accusation. So how can you have a conversation with somebody who makes up lies that preposterous?
For something, I don't care what you think you are. I want to have a conversation about what the actual reality points to. The ones we can.
No, you don't. You have no interest in what reality points to. That your whole scientific theory is a big giant rejection of the experimental evidence.
So again, another bizarre accusation, where I'm the one actually pointing to the real evidence. He's the one who presented the fake evidence. And again, he hasn't answered any of the questions I've asked about all this other evidence. Why is there these other contradictions? Why all these contradictions? Why does quantum mechanics 1 minute say photons interfere with themselves, and the next minute says two photons can interfere with each other? No Huygens required, no wave functions required, just two photons interfere somehow in mid-space by some process, completely unknown process. And yet we have the evidence that, well, jamming does exactly the same thing mathematically. So, why is the interference conclusion so much stronger than the jamming conclusion, when the interference conclusion requires something extraordinary to happen, something we can't make happen anywhere else? So how can it happen here, can't happen anywhere else? And then you have another theory that completely explains the phenomenon and doesn't require anything extraordinary. But I won't get any answers to those questions. So again, it's just, his bias is just so obvious. I mean, to ridicule what I'm doing or how I'm doing it, when there's absolutely nothing. There's no evidence of any deception or any will to confuse any subject or to use any kind of preposterous language. And I'm making very pale accusations, merely that they jumped evidence. I'm not arguing that they conspired or they had some evil intent or any kind of maliciousness. I'm just saying they jumped evidence. They weren't very good scientists in the sense they really didn't obey the rules, which are you got to wait for the evidence before you draw hard conclusions. Conclusions hard enough where you ridicule people as if they're flat earth malicious, right? Clearly malicious people. People who are maliciously obstinate to the truth. They don't care about the evidence, okay? To be a flat earther, you have to not care about the evidence. And there's no evidence that I don't care about the evidence. There's every bit of evidence that if you show me evidence, I will go to the trouble to look at it.
You pretend it hasn't happened, because what else can you pretend when you don't like reality?
Right. So he's saying I'm pretending something hasn't happened. Like what hasn't happened? I'm arguing that, well, there's no theoretical grounding for converting mass into radiation, okay? Magical radiation, that is bent space. There's no theoretical argument for that. That's in one guy's mind, Kip Thorne. So who else thought of it? Who else thinks it's true? Who else did any science to prove that is possible? But one guy who just made it up. So you're telling me I have to believe it. Somehow the evidence proves it. No, there's no evidence for any of it. You know, so you're telling me I have to believe in something that there's no evidence that actually takes place. It's just his story. That's just their story. Okay, that somehow it's possible to convert hard matter into magical bent geometry. Yet we have no theory for it.
And see how you feel and interact with the real world. That's the place I want to talk about. I don't want to like fantasy worlds.
Well, that's the difference. I do like talking about other people's fantasy worlds. It's just I can never make this shit up myself.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of the problem, though. Is you gotta. There's a point where, again, see, I get him to concede in some conversation to some real world element, and then he'll just open the door again and say, "Let's all talk about stuff we can just make up and stuff we can just imagine. Let's just do a bunch of thought experiments instead of paying any attention to the hard evidence of the real experiments and actually getting to the actual functions of the real experiment. What really happened? What did Young really see? And is there some reason to think what he saw was at all remarkable compared to what Newton had seen 150 years earlier?"
No, I don't. I really don't. I talk about how the evidence is what logic's made out of. It's facts. The facts they...
That's a philosophy of science.
So this is where we get to the thing of that's a philosophy of science. No, it isn't. Because the whole point is philosophy is pulled out of that same dots. All there are dots. And our ability to make more of them. So we do experiments and that makes more dots. Okay? We do statistical analysis, which is of course sort of an experiment. We detail what happens to people over a 10-year period and we throw some more dots on the screen. We put weather patterns into the computer and process and that throws more dots on the screen. So all we're doing is trying to get a better resolution of pictures. So it's like this computer screen you're watching right now if you're watching something. There's a certain amount of pixels. And if I start taking away pixels, it gets harder and harder for you to tell, well, is that his head or is that a penis? What is that? It gets harder and harder to be able to draw a conclusion about what you're seeing. What's actually it's an image of. And that's all our brain does. So our brain is just looking at the field, it's looking at the screen and saying, what do I see? What do I recognize? And what we do with science is throw more dots on the screen. And the point is that what we are capable of doing is throwing false pixels on the screen. So it's capable of having some kind of physics professor just make up stories about what kind of experiments were done and throw those dots on. See, we did an experiment where we detected the photons and we turned the detector off and then we did this and we did that. None of that actually happened. But they're throwing those dots on the screen. Those are false dots. They're just made up dots. They don't have anything to do with anything real. They're not. That's not a real experiment. So that fake experiment creates fake dots. And that just creates some noise that's going to end up making us draw wrong, connecting backwards and connecting sideways. And so when they put Einstein right on the, as a headline in the New York Times, that's fake dots. Because, no, Einstein wasn't really proven right. Okay, so it's still a hugely open question. And instead of recognizing it was a hugely open question, everybody just closed the book and said, okay, we're all going to believe in this nonsense that everything has a not real velocity. It's only a velocity relative to something else or something, and somehow we can be in 17 different frames and be really going 17,000 times the speed of light or something because we're in so multiple frames. Complete paradoxical nonsense now has become a reality because of this declaration of rightness, when there was no rightness. There was no proof. There was no, it was a good trial. It was a crappy trial.
Themselves, even the description of it, it's just simple. They connect the dots.
You even did a description, so how, like, what's the relationship between a description of how science works and the philosophy of science? Oh, being the same thing, that would be their relationship.
So again, it's really not the foundation of the argument. My argument is that philosophy, understanding what meaning is just as much work as understanding what an electron is. So it takes just as much work to create the understanding, to go through the process of figuring out, well, which one of my feelings are real, elemental, and which one of them I only have because I was raised by white people, or which ones are the only ones I have because of some special circumstance that just has to do with me. It's not a truth, it's just what my mechanics do. My mechanics react a certain way. I shouldn't assume that everybody else reacts the same way. I have to have evidence to say, oh yeah, we have that in common. So I can say things like, yeah, well, we all have in common this whole pinchy thing, okay, except for like 4 people on Earth. I pinch you, it hurts. We all have some common capacity to know the difference between something that feels good and feel bad. Well, maybe we don't get, your headache is like my stub toe, some things we don't do exactly the same. So when I say headache to you, it means, so what? And to somebody else, it means my whole day is gone. Horrible, I wish I was dead kind of feelings. So yeah, we have all this we have to be kind of careful about conclusions we draw, and that's philosophy. Philosophy, you have to be just as careful as you have to be about doing science. And my argument is Pierrot does both of them sloppy and reckless, and both of them with agenda. He has an agenda. He wants the truth to conform, to sit inside of a certain kind of pyramid he's built. Now, clearly I also have an agenda in the sense that, but my agenda is just, that's a silly explanation, and it doesn't have any evidence. So when somebody walks into the OJ trial and they say, it's a bunch of Mexican drug lords and and some silly thing where, yeah, they always leave a sign, they always, send messages, they wouldn't have just cut her head off and just walked away, that would have been silly. They always do something, to make it a theater. So there's reasons you could say, no, that didn't happen. That's not why it happened. That's not who did it, okay? And then the fact that there's no other evidence corroborating any reason for that. But anyway, I'm just saying, so you find that their explanation has these huge holes in it, and you see that, well, why are they so bent on this wave thing? Why are they so compelled to keep forcing everything to be a wave based on some silly idea that the simplest pattern in the universe always has to be interference? It can't be created by any other mechanism. On, off, on, off, on, off. Can't be created by any other mechanism in the universe except interference. And clearly they, it's just, I'm just anti drawing that conclusion to preserve a notion that that's not cognizable. Again, I'm just being honest. I'm saying I can't understand for the life of me, okay, physics that says something has a bunch of features or capacities for which I can't possibly understand where it gets them from. Where's the mechanism? Snakes can move like a snake because they have muscles and they have all this stuff. How is a photon doing all that nonsense? Why the hell is it doing this herky-jerky motion thing in 2 different fields and all? I can't make any sense out of that as an elemental function. And then the rest of their theory just has to do with ESP, basically. Okay, I mean, their notion of gravity is basically every single atom or every single constituent of an atom, proton, electron, somehow has ESP, and it just, it has this special remote sensing capacity and the capacity to, like knock airplanes out of the sky. It somehow can just wish stuff. Sorry, yeah, it doesn't fit in my brain as a rational theory. It sounds like a UFO theory. It has every appearance of being just some sort of UFO. Look, I have a fuzzy cigar picture. There, is that enough proof? Are we done? We've proven quantum mechanics, right? Because I got a cigar picture here. I can't see any difference. So if you can explain to me, show me where the difference is between the UFO people jumping to wild conclusions based on garbage evidence and conventional science jumping to bizarre conclusions based on garbage evidence. If you can show me that, how there's a distinction, well then I'll concede that, okay, I went in with a bias. But frankly, all I think I did was that I sat in a classroom and I started watching a teacher explain how this stupid cigar image was proof there's UFOs. And I was like, that's not proof there's UFOs. What are you talking about? Electrons don't have a fucking wavelength. What are you talking? They have a momentum. Cars don't have wavelengths as they're going down the road. They just have the speedometers on a number. They're going to speed. They have momentum. They don't have no frickin' wavelength. Why you tell me they have a wavelength when they obviously don't have one? Why are you doing that? Again, it's they're the one with the agenda.
And if you have lots of dots, you don't have to do any connecting. And there's only a few dots, well then it gets a little tricky to get the detail right, because you have to go in a little bit to get the smile right or some other kind of thing. So you have to have a little bit of cleverness in how you connect the dots. That's all there really is. And we're just saying whose picture of what the image looks like is better.
Right, and so we're having this huge argument because, you know, it gets offensive because, you know, Pierrot's claiming I have to accept a whole bunch of dots that I can't see. I can't see them as real. Okay, no way. They're not been proven in any way whatsoever. And why should I put them on the screen until I'm sure there's some reason to put them there? Now, I can try and imagine them. So he tells me the story. Photons do this, 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 and this. They have all the, you know, it's Copenhagen, or it's they create a new universe, and you know, randomness is innate in the universe. Okay, well, let me see if I put the randomness is innate in the universe thing, this Heisenberg nonsense on here. Can I see anything with that in the way? And everything gets less resolvable. All the stuff that I already knew is real gets harder to see. So that's all I see. When I put that on top of my screen, I see things that are really solid disappear. Because, yeah, it's just darkening the screen. It's taking away resolution. It's not giving me resolution. It's making the image noisier. It's not making it clearer. And so he doesn't see that, okay? He doesn't see how those silly notions of magical fields and stuff, when he puts them on the screen, he somehow sees more. And I see less.
The one with the wacky jacket, silly dots of bed space, and Huygens and Heisenberg magic aren't my rational theory.
It's the Heisenberg stuff.
Right, so he just makes a declarative statement that somehow there's more evidence. Okay, so again, I would argue Pierrot, well, he won't do it, but I'm just saying, you know, go to my magnetism video, okay? I'll leave a link below, and just show me, link me to the conventional explanation that is either simpler or more complete in terms of fitting the evidence, in terms of creating a mechanical process that works. And as I pointed out, the mechanical process I'm using actually does explain gravity, and it does explain electricity, and it does explain the nuclear forces. So it does explain all this other stuff. So you can't get out by saying, oh yeah, well that's not a universal force. Well, yeah, it is. So, you know, but just explain to me why you think your theory has more evidence or is more consistent with the evidence when the theory I'm offering you fits wonderfully. And you don't have any real way to critique it and say, no, it's no good. It's completely broken.
Well, look, it should have something called integrity. That's right. Scientists shouldn't.
Okay, this is philosophy of science, saying science should have integrity, which I agree with.
Okay, that's not philosophy. Again, the fact that the objective of making the screen resolvable is not made resolvable with lies is such a fundamental part of screen viewing that it would be preposterous for somebody to argue that no, lying's not important. So clearly we know that's important. That's one of the first things you see in connecting the dots, is that I can't connect dots unless I'm given real dots. So that's the first rule of dot connecting, is the dots have to be real. And that we know the easiest source of fake dots is lying. So let's not do that. Okay? I mean, but to call that philosophy, no, it's just a fact. that fake dots will give you a fake picture. Okay, so that's just a fact. It's not philosophy. That's one of the facts you use to make a philosophy.
It's an important part. Science is founded on honesty.
Right, and all I've done in my videos is point out all the dishonesty and the fact that the evidence is incredibly weak evidence, not strong evidence. There's no overwhelming Darwinian-style bulk of evidence that makes it unreasonable to believe otherwise. There's plenty of reason to believe otherwise, and the evidence is so weak. Again, these silly conclusions. It looks like waves a little bit, kind of. Yeah, the waves are going up and down. That means on and off, okay, and the light doesn't go on and off. Lots of things aren't the same, and yeah, no, it doesn't match the single slit, and yeah, no, it doesn't match the multi-slit, and yeah, there's this other pattern that's in there that screws everything up, that's there for no good reason that we can't explain. So you know, I mean, it's just so bad, and the fact that they can't concede, they're saying, I'm being honest by saying we have overwhelming evidence. I'm being honest by saying Robert Young, or whatever his name was, you know, put the nail in the coffin. You know, the Young experiment put the nail in the coffin. You think that's an honest description of reality? That we've proven it's a wave because it matches a little bit in one experiment, and as long as we ignore all the other experiments and ignore all the other data pointing otherwise, yes, it's conclusive evidence. No, it's so far from any kind of conclusive evidence. It's so far from any right to commit to a guilty verdict. And for you to be incapable of acknowledging that horrible foundation for your physics is just part of your lying desperation. I mean, what else can you call it? I mean, how can I see it as all honest for you to tell me, I think it's as strong as the theory of evolution? Yes, everybody really does have an obligation to recognize this truth. How can you say that with a straight face? How can you say you have compiled that volume of evidence, and when the evidence is in such a terrible state? How do you do that and with a straight face and tell me you care about honesty when you won't admit that it's just obviously thin evidence, emaciatedly thin evidence, tiny number of dots drawing the conclusion, tiny.
Right? When you do dishonest science, it's not science, right? But that's the kind of science you do, Pierrot.
So, see these accusations. Again, I can show you the videos where he presents the fake evidence. He's not going to be able to show a video of me presenting fake evidence. So again, just more, you know, how can there be any kind of civil conversation when I'm being called a liar by a despicable liar? How can I tolerate being called duplicitous by somebody so obviously duplicitous? Number one, he won't admit the evidence is incredibly weak, and then he'll sit there and present endless reams of fake crap. He'll sit there and cite something like the tunneling microscope as if the tunneling microscope has anything to do with physical technology. It's software. It's not creating a real image. It's creating a computer-generated synthetic image. Yes, it's a pretty good image. I'm not saying it's error. I'm not saying it's nonsense. I'm saying, yeah, it's good that you can use computer science to enhance images created by electron microscopes. Great. But let's not pretend that this is some sort of new magical technology that only quantum mechanics could provide, because that's not the truth. Oh, amazing. All right. So I don't know how much to go through. But I mean, he talks as if we can't understand why our ability to communicate in kind of like some friendly manner is gone. That may never be recoupable just because of the, you know, so it's sort of like you say a few things when you're drunk and you just can't take them back. You know, they're stuck saying them for the rest of your life. You just can't take it back. You know, when you called her fat ass, you know, she's always going to hold it against you. And so, yeah, some of it we can't repair. And I don't know if there's any need to. But again, I'm just talking from my point of view. Something's better than nothing. So I will admit that this is an act of desperation, where I would actually say, okay, I would like that Pierrot make a physics video just so I'd have something to ridicule from the conventional people, because they're making no argument. All they're doing is insulting my hair or some other nonsense. They're not really making any physical arguments that mean anything. They're not answering any of my questions ever. They don't respond to any of the points I raise about the weakness of their evidence, and all they do is keep, harping on some stupid little thing, some little tiny issue, some distraction, ignoring the videos I'm pointing them to and saying, pick that apart. All right, not the one I did 7 years ago. No, pick that one apart. So, but anyway, yeah, so I don't know how much to harp on this. We can play a little tiny bit more, but I mean, this whole argument about the integrity of science, he's saying, I believe it should have integrity. So he's really arguing somehow that he thinks I'm being dishonest if I don't look at what they've put on the table as a theory, and I can see the dots that they threw on there based on superficial judgment. And I can actually show you where they're wearing tuxedos presenting physics, the truth, and it's full of not truth. Okay, they can't even get their own history right, accurate, and they can't even understand the experiments correctly. And these are the nail in the coffin experiments, the experiments that prove something, and they can't describe them honestly. Now, isn't that fundamentally valid, that I would say, oh, well, that's reason to, let's not make any of those dots permanent. They're not a very good source, is it? Is that a good source? I should pay attention to a source who can't get the fundamental experiments right, the simplest, the oldest, the most elemental to the theory. They can't describe those right. I should believe them about gravitational waves or some other kind of nonsense? I don't think so. I don't think that would be being reasonable.
Little girls who jump to silly conclusions and see snakes everywhere, or penises, whichever one scares them most. Shouldn't be.
Snakes or penises, whatever scares them the most. Funny line. Anyway.
Hysterical. Doing hysterical science, and that's what it looks like. It's all this contrived crap. They just.
Well, I think that the way you do science looks pretty fucking hysterical.
So it's just. It's like to argue with a 3-year-old, right? You say you did that wrong and it's sloppy, and then they just say, same to you, or because, or it's some kind of childish rhetoric where every point I make, he just sits there and says, you too. Well, what evidence? Where's your evidence that I'm being dishonest? Where's your evidence that I'll cut the corners and I'll, shove in something that's, not really the truth? No, you don't have any such evidence. So anyway. So, for what it is, it's sort of a Pierrot video responding to the old argument as well as the new. But again, for somebody so arrogant and so sure that he's right, why doesn't he just consider me? I mean, why doesn't he do videos defending conventional science if he thinks it's worthy of defense? I mean, there are lots of people who believe all kinds of things. There's lots of the flat earthers, and there's lots of the Ken Wheelers, and there's lots of the dissident Dave. And he'll have a conversation with the dissident Dave guy, but he won't point out how you really don't have any evidence for this small earth thing. You really don't, okay? You have nothing, really, because you haven't explained how all the other phenomena that would be changed in the universe, how all those changes wouldn't have mattered. When I think it's just kind of preposterous, and you don't have any mechanism for the, how'd the oil get in the ground? You really think the Earth makes petroleum? You think it does that? And water at the same time? It makes oil and water at the same time? I mean, but yeah, so he has no energy to fight with them, but somehow he has the energy to sit there and argue my theory, which is solid. So that's the irony here. Right? And he won't argue it with any specifics, though. He just argues it with negating rhetoric, insulting rhetoric. But he doesn't do that to old dissident Dave. So, obviously, again, just pointing out how who's duplicitous. Clearly, this is the person with the inconsistencies, not me. I'm not the one guilty of inconsistencies. All right, so that's enough. It probably was more than enough, but we'll take it for what it is, period, and see if anything comes of it. Like I said, even if we make videos remaining hostile to each other, I would just like to see your defense of conventional physics. You know, defend it if you think it's right.